Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
And we are live. Apologies for that. There was a miscommunication there with the link that I gave to Kay. I was like, oh man, he's not here. But anyways, welcome to the Doctor of Stuff channel. I am your host, Doctor of Stuff. And today with me, we have this special guest. I'm so excited. You all know him as HelloKay. I now lovingly refer to him as Fudmaster Supreme.
That's my new name.
Yeah, I love it, and I'm really excited, actually, Kay, to give a little bit of a background. What I thought would be great. I've been in VeVe since March of 2021, and I started seeing YouTubers like yourself, like Kyle Tiger Wilson, NFT Pirates, Crypto Rain, Randy Chavez, right? And more. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I've heard some of their stories, but it's all over the place, like where they're at. And I'm like, I think it'd be so cool to interview a lot of the OG VeVe YouTubers and hear their story, like where they were before they got into crypto and NFTs, when they got into VeVe/OMI, why they started a YouTube channel, right? So I've done that so far with Crypto Rain, did that with Randy, but like, with everything that's been going on in Twitter Spaces, and there's just a lot of controversy, and some of it, right, around you and some of your comments. And so, anyways, I just want to start off and say I'm grateful that you're coming on to the channel. I think it'd be awesome. You're a highly intelligent person. Love your insights, and I want to dive into some of the concerns and things like that. But to open it up, Kay, I'd love to start up by just saying, can you give us a little bit of a background on yourself before you got into crypto?
Oh, before I got into crypto?
Yeah, just kind of like before you got into crypto, and then kind of what led you into crypto and the NFT space.
Oh, right. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So at the time, I used to be a scientific researcher. So I was researching stem cells. So I was working in this like scientific lab. It was basically inside a hospital in this massive building in London called Guy's Tower. So I was looking at human-induced pluripotent stem cells. So I was basically looking at markers for indicating like congenital blindness and like basically ways of detecting it early so you could treat it. And then I basically realized that didn't pay very well because you're dependent on government grants and like research grants, and you can't, and the lifestyle's horrible. Like like right now I might be in a lab because you time your experiments, and sometimes you just have to go do stuff, right? Because otherwise you lose your data. And then I was like, okay, let me do something that's more routine, like 9 to 5 kind of thing, right? Because that kind of lifestyle is horrible. So I became a teacher, and then I realized teaching pays horribly. So I was like a high school science teacher, and then at that time I was basically looking at like ways of like saving, because I didn't quite believe the whole, like put your money in a pension and then wait until you're like 65 and then retire. Now in the UK, it's like 70. They keep extending it. So I basically started investing into some stocks. And then I didn't really know what I was doing. And then my friend, so I have a friend he's a famous DJ. His name's DJ Renegade. So anyone who's in like the hip hop scene would know him. He DJs for like Red Bull BC1, like breakdancing competitions, things like that. So what a lot of people don't realize about him is he's a DJ, but he's also a qualified physicist, and he used to work in finance, which is like really weird. And now he's a DJ. And he's the first one who told me about Bitcoin, like back when it was like a couple $100. He was like telling everyone, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. And I was like, okay, let me look into this. So I bought a little bit. I set up a Coinbase account, and then I was just looking at some coins, bought a little bit here, like $30-40 of ETH, like and then I saw all of a sudden like a 20% gain. So ETH was like $60, and it went to like $75, and I was taking a screenshot, and I'm like, oh look, I made 20%. Like I didn't know this was possible, because at the time I was under this impression that, hey, 20% in the stock market is meant to be good by Warren Buffett's definition, right? And I was like, I just made 20% in like a couple of weeks. So I was like, wow, this is cool. And then I started getting more into it. And then I started looking at like, altcoins, like, on Poloniex, there weren't that many. Like back then you could get like DigiBuy and like, I think it was called Sia Coin. And then, yeah, there were some others. And then I saw XRP for 2 cents and I just started buying that. And I literally had no reason for buying it. I only bought it because I thought the name sounded cool, like XRP. That sounds like a token. So I was like, okay, let me buy like, $50 of this. It's 2 cents each, like I can get like, tons of these tokens. With Bitcoin, I'm only buying like, 0.1 of it, or like, 0.5 or whatever. And then, yeah, that was kind of like how my crypto journey got led up. And then, at the time I was just holding, I wasn't like buying or selling. And then we had that big bull run, end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And I was like thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm going to be a millionaire. And then that was my first mistake is, I became overconfident and I thought, everything was going to keep going up. And then we had a huge correction and then all my gains were basically lost. And then I was like, okay, fine, whatever. And at the time, crypto was still new. So there was the narrative of like, oh, this crypto thing, it was like the, tulip fever. It was a bubble, .com boom, exact same thing. The bubble is over. Get on with your life. And then, yeah, at that point, I was like still kind of holding and I was like, oh, whatever, like, and then I kind of left it, but I wasn't actively buying or anything anymore.
Oh my gosh.
I got rugged. Yeah.
I just rugged you, man, because I'm trying to like add you. See, this is where, man. Okay, hold on. I was trying to.
Make me the middle.
Front and center, man. And then I brought me front and center. Oh my gosh, there's that. That's what.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Sorry, guys, technical difficulties. Yeah. So, your story. It's what's interesting, Kay. A lot of people that got in to crypto during that time and they experienced that euphoric bull run, and like you said, like I'm going to be rich, I'm going to be a millionaire. Everything is going up and it's never coming down.
Yeah.
And then it starts to crash, right? And you're like, oh, like it'll go back up, and then it dips a little bit more, and you're like, oh, it'll go back up, and it just like, keeps going and going. And a lot of people check out at that point, right? Like once their gains like are wiped out completely, and they maybe even then experience losses. They're just like, this crypto thing, it's too volatile, I'm out. So like what kept you even like somewhat in the game, right? Like, and looking at that.
I mean, it was partly, I was just like, I'm just gonna leave like what I had left in there. I was like, I'll set and forget. Because I didn't like need the money at the time, right? And I didn't want to go through the process. And withdrawing it back then was kind of annoying as well. Like Coinbase was quite unreliable at the time. Obviously now it's better, but I was like, you know what? If I ever need the money, I'll just pull it out, withdraw it. But honestly, I kind of left the crypto space. I stopped researching into it. I just kind of like parked it on the side, and I just kind of carried on with my life for like 2 years. And then I got back into it again when a friend of mine, he just came up to me, wannabe champ. So Dan Chung, he's a really cool guy. He just came up to me and he started asking me, oh, stuff about crypto. Can you like help me learn? Like, how do I get started? And I kind of already knew because I was like heavily involved. So I kind of helped him set up, and then he started trading. And then he was like, oh, I can help you like, trade crypto. Like you can just kind of do it with me. I'll like show you, I'll just tell you what I'm doing and you can basically copy it. So I was doing that. And then that was like kind of August, September time of like 2020. And that was right before the next bull run started again. And so I caught the start of that next run. And then it was like, oh, crypto isn't dead. Like it's coming back. Obviously, there were catalysts to that, like, the stimulus money. Apparently 15% of all the COVID stimulus money went into crypto. So that would like contribute a lot to that bull run. Like that is not normal. But yeah, like from there, it was just like, okay. And then I started looking to NFTs because that's a new asset type. I was like, oh, okay, this could, do some stuff. And then from there, I just kind of got back into it again. And I've been in it since then because I've learned my lesson. Like I regret not sticking around because I could have just carried on buying, I had a bag of Cardano, right? And I bought it at like near ICO price. It was like half a penny. Like I had like a bag of Cardano because I quite liked the concept of Cardano when they first kind of, unveiled it. And then it got to 5 cents. So that was like a 10x. That was like kind of in the bear market. It was 5 cents. And I just sold all of it. I was like, yeah, whatever. If I held that, that would have, that would have paid out quite well. But I was like, whatever. But yeah, I learned a lot of good lessons. I'm still learning some very important lessons from my trader friends, because this cycle I've learned that the ones who did the best were all the ones with like that very kind of trader psychology, like the ones who know how to manage risk quite well. So that's what I've been working more heavily on. Is next time round I want to have that perfect kind of level of risk management where I don't get overly greedy. Like I make sure I've like recouped my initial with a bit of profit, and whatever else I have left I can just leave that to run. So even if things go to zero, at least I know I'm not going to go back to zero.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Just taking profits on the way up and hedging, right? Some of that risk of the volatility that goes in there, and that's something that like I had to learn too. I thought everything was going up, man, and because crypto was, to me, it seemed so different than stocks. The gains that you can make, and you do like, and it's the euphoria. Like there's no other way to describe it. It's just like you just see these gains that are just absolutely unimaginable, honestly. I mean, like when you say 10x, like it's funny because crypto people are like, oh yeah, 10x, right? But like stock people are like, wait, 10x, right? Like that's insane. And you're like, oh no, like there's projects that have done 1000x. Like those numbers are just unreal. And so as you start seeing that go up, you're just like, it's not going to stop. And that greed kicks in. Whereas if you can separate the emotion and go into logic and be like, you know what, I'm not going to be able to time the top. So if I can kind of take things out along the way and have a strategy like you're talking about, and it has been interesting, seeing some of your posts. Now, it would be interesting because what I notice in general is that traders post their wins, but not so much their losses, and so that's something that's interesting too with seeing traders. They love to post the wins. So have you ever done that? Have you ever posted losses and been like, oh, like I'm still learning, or I'm doing this?
Yeah. I mean, everyone, to be honest, just because of the nature of it, like pretty much everyone knows that my wallets and stuff anyway. But like, just today I actually shared on Twitter, like, I can actually pull it up as well. Or actually, I think I've got it open here, right? Let me pull it up, and then I can actually share the screen. So I've been doing like some challenges, right? And one of them is a funded trading challenge. Let me try. And
Oh, I saw you post that actually, and that was one of the first times where I saw. Yeah, like
Okay.
I've been trying to follow more of your trade posts and be like, all right, how successful is Kay? How's he really doing here? Right?
Yeah, I think you can like pull up the screen on the middle. It needs to be shared.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
There we go.
All right.
Yeah. So basically, what I was trying to show, right? So I have a funded trading account here. So here, this comes with $50,000, right? So funded trading, $50,000, and you can see, I traded for 8 days. You get 14 days on it, right? The most I lost in a day was 1,200, and that was just because I was not sticking to my plan. I was being a bit greedy. I was trading, during high volatility times, Bitcoin. And my profit target overall, so that's after losses, right? So I had to hit 2.5K. And then, you can see I hit that. So I started off at, zero, and I was in profit for like, the first couple of days. And then this is where I started to go stupid, is I was at negative 1K here. You can see that. And then I kind of crawled out a little bit. I was at negative 400, and now went back to negative 1K again. Because I was being, impatient, and I basically stopped trading for a couple of days, and I went in with I had very, very tight stop losses. I went in with very minimal risk. So even if I lost, lose a small amount, and then you can see, I started to make small wins here. I made 200 here, 200 here, and then I had one well-placed Bitcoin trade, because most of my trades, they're breakout trades. So sometimes what happens is it will go down first. Let's say if I'm longing something, it'll go down first, wipe out my stop loss, and then go in my direction. Because generally on the higher time frames, usually a lot of the times, or majority of the time, I can predict where the direction of movement's going. But on the smaller time frame, I don't know if it's going to go down first and then go to my direction, or go up first and go down to where I think. But this time, like, it actually broke out in my direction without stopping me out. So you can see I then went from like break even, and then I basically went straight to like 1K, and then 1.2, 1.4, 1.6. And then you can see here, I just slowly lowered my risk even more. And I just made like $100, $200 a day, 1.8, and then 1.9, and then 2K. And then slowly, and then here I went from 2.1 straight to nearly 2.6. And that was enough to pass the challenge, right? So these challenges, they're more about consistency. Because if you're just going to be someone who YOLOs, slaps the whole 50K balance on like one trade and then lose it, like, you're probably going to get blacklisted firstly, because this money belongs to a proprietary trading firm. I think the money comes from JP Morgan, I think. It's one of those like big investment banks. But secondly, like, you're not really trading, you're gambling at that point. And so what you learn is like the importance of risk management, lowering the amount that you can potentially lose, but also having a plan and sticking to it. Because where I was losing money, I wasn't sticking to my original plan. Where I started to make money is where I was being consistent, like low risk. I've got a strategy, I have a certain setup, and I let the trade come to me. I don't try and force a trade. If there's no trades in the day that I can see, then I'll just not trade that day. And that's a difficult thing, is people feel like they need to be doing stuff, but it's fine just to say, oh, there's nothing that I want to trade today, I'll just leave it. Even a week, like, you can leave it for a week. Because when that trade finally comes to you, like, and it's got high probability, you've managed your risk, like, you can easily, like, make a, like you saw there, I made 1K, which was like, nearly half of the profit target. And if you scale this up to like a 200K account, then, you can make 10K in like a week. And I know plenty of traders that, they consistently, hit those targets because they have very good risk management. It's just about consistency, really, not over leveraging yourself.
I like the don't marry your bags. I mean, like, it really is like that, taking the emotion out of it, and like you said, like, sticking to that game plan. Now, so here's the thing with me, and I would assume for most people, right? The way that I invest, I mean, and I love it. I love seeing the people. It's been awesome kind of seeing you really dive into this, right? And be learning about this. I see you in some of those trading groups and the comments and stuff, but I just don't have the time, right? And so I try to pick projects or tokens, and look at the fundamentals and say, hey, like, does the price, where's the price at right now? Compared to its history. And sometimes it's a brand new project or a brand new token. But I'm saying, hey, what are the fundamentals for the team? Do that kind of research. And then I'm kind of like short to midterm investments, because I can't stand to look at things like on the day to day and get into that. I think because it's too difficult for me to control those emotions. But so speaking of like projects that I've looked at, the short to long, like medium term, or even longer term. One of those for me was VeVe, right? So how did you get into VeVe? How did you find VeVe? Did you find OMI first? Is that how?
Yeah.
And how did you find OMI then?
Yeah. So I found OMI first, and I only found it because there was a post on Reddit that someone from, so it's from someone at Wannabe Champ knows as well. Like, we have this like a trading group, and he was basically at the time finding some, potential tokens we could look at. And then he was like, oh, there's one called OMI. It's got Alfred Khan in it, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, okay, let me look into it. And then I bought some. And I got in at 007 or 006. Maybe, I think it was maybe 005, actually. Yeah, I think it was 005. And then it went to 007. And then it went to like 009. And then it went to 1 cent. And then 1.2, 1.3 cents, like around the Uniswap listing. And so I was like, oh, wow, like, this token's going to do really well because of the IP and stuff. And then I hadn't really bought VeVe stuff back then. So I was buying OMI around February, but I didn't get into VeVe until March, like the month after, because I saw the Batman in the store and I was like, oh, I ain't going to pay like, $80 for this 3D Batman. Like, why am I going to pay $80 for a 3D, file? Like, I can just download this for free. But then I was like, okay, like, I saw, people selling them on eBay and stuff. And my first drop was Ultraman, and I only did the Ultraman one because I was familiar with Ultraman already. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I made some profit like with OMI, like, this is only $40, $50. Let me grab one. And I ended up getting 2 actually on the drop day, Ultraman 7s, and I got the common as well. Actually, I didn't get the rare one, but then I saw the rare one was going for a lot. Like, it was going for like 5x of what the retail price was, and even the uncommon was going for a little bit above retail. And I was like, oh, okay, there's I think there's something here, like, because this is quite new. And because then I saw how well NBA Top Shots was doing, so I just basically started getting more involved in it, researching more, and then I mean that just led me to my whole journey.
Okay, so at what point? Oh, and I guess I don't know this, Kay, but did you have a YouTube channel before VeVe? How did you get into YouTube?
Yeah,
and
I was in YouTube videos before. It was on the same channel, and the name HelloKay basically comes from Hello World, and Hello World is basically for anyone who learns how to code. It's like the first thing you ever learn is Hello World. So basically, it's just on the screen. You're just writing some code which prints to the screen Hello World, and so anyone who ever dabbles in any kind of coding, they'll know what you mean by, oh, do you know how to do Hello World? Because that's the first thing you're ever going to learn. And so because my channel was a tech coding channel, I just did HelloKay because it's like a pun.
Love that,
yeah. So because this content I did was mostly how to help people get into software engineering. Because like I explained, I don't have a software engineering background. I became a software engineer after having been, my previous role was in finance. So I was an equity analyst at Bloomberg, which is where I started to learn how to code, because we were like learning, it was like a proprietary language there that they have called BQL, like Bloomberg Query Language. It's kind of like SQL. Like I'm sure you heard of SQL. Yeah. So they also have like their own version of Python. I can't remember what the name was, but yeah, from there I was like, we're coding like, little scripts and things, but nothing crazy. But then I was like, oh, okay, I quite enjoy this. Like, let me learn it properly. And then I did like a coding boot camp, and then I got my first job in an asset management firm as a backend engineer, and then just kind of like continue from there.
That's awesome, man. So at what point did you decide, hey, I'm going to convert my channel from kind of like dev and tech to VeVe and talking about?
Interesting. So at the time I made one OMI video. It was like my first OMI video, and that thing did like 15,000 views. It was like, it was titled, or maybe 20,000, I can't remember, but it was titled how to secure, actually the first one was an OMI video. It was basically me going through the OMI smart contract and like the code that they have on GitHub. It was like more of a tech thing, but apparently a lot of people liked it because they're like, oh, no one has done this kind of video before. And I was kind of talking about the token and like things like that. And then I did a video on VeVe, which was like how to secure VeVe drop, something like that, right? And it was the Ultraman drop. And because a lot of people didn't quite understand how to do the VeVe drops, like, all the tips and tricks, like, you need to sign in an hour before because the app's going to crash if you try and sign in, like, on the drop time, like that kind of stuff. So I basically walked through all the tips and tricks at the time. And I showed myself getting the Ultraman drop. And, at the time, people think it's sold out because they're getting the error messages. But what you had to do is you had to just keep clicking through the errors. And eventually, like, if you're lucky, you get it. It was all of that kind of nonsense from back then. So I basically showed myself doing it. And that video, like, a lot of people referenced that when they were getting to VeVe. And then, Wannabe Champ was the same. He was doing Forex related videos, which were, they were not doing super well, like, get a few hundred views. But when he did the OMI stuff, he got like 5K views like straight away. And he's like, oh, wow. And then he started doing more OMI videos. And then all of a sudden, like, his viewership grew. But the problem is his viewership was like, at that point, became 90% like crypto OMI people. But the point of his channel was always Forex trading. And so it became kind of weird. It's like he's doing a Forex trading channel, but his audience is now OMI people. So he was kind of forced to do more OMI videos, just to cater to that audience. That's like kind of how it started.
Yeah. Well, that's funny when you talk about those videos. So like, I mean, my channel, I started it back in July of last year, right? And I'm like, oh, because I was on Crypto Rain's channel talking about VeVe probably once a week. And he was like, you should just do it yourself, start your own channel, right? And start making those connections. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then I realized like what a pain it was, because I was like editing and I'm like a perfectionist. And it was like, man, one like 10-minute video was taking me like 5 hours. I'm like, this is unsustainable, you know? So you see me like drop off, but like one of my first videos was like how to avoid common crypto scams. I'm like, this is so important. Like this information is so important, right? And I put it out there, and I think maybe it has like 100 views or something. And then I do my first interview with crypto. Well, I had around the Comiverse, and Reese came on, right? And that video has like 2,000 views on it. And like, you know, the OMI, I mean, the VeVe fan, man, like they are strong and they devour content. And it is funny to see that difference, right? And especially during the bull market, kind of, or the tail end of that bull market when OMI was good and VeVe was brand new, and a lot of people were searching it out and stuff. Fascinating. I wanted to give a shout out to Biscuits I Like. Oh wait, where'd she go? She popped in. She's saying, "Hey fam." She wanted to wave hi and say, "Hey Fudmaster Supreme." Fans up here.
She was like, "Fudmaster Supreme sounds like Taco Bell, like the Crunch Supreme."
Yeah, and I had to throw this out there. This was funny. I hadn't shown it yet because I wanted, but you know, I want you to answer this question, Kay.
Came to England to see you and has been locked in the Tower of London since he yeah. I mean, when he came to London, like I met him, I met his girlfriend. Then we went out with Wet Wizard, who a really cool guy as well. It was funny. I really enjoyed like meeting Taps, and then saw him again when I went to Anaheim as well. I know Taps is very busy with kind of work and stuff, and he's the type of person where I think he like you know, whenever the markets are down, he just like kind of, you know, puts it to the side, ignores the noise, and just does his own thing, and then he comes back like, you know, when things are okay again. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he's like still about. He's like, you know, not gone, but and not locked in a dungeon, but he's I think he's doing well.
Well, that's good that he's not locked in the Tower of London. You know, and I want to say like this is funny, you know. Look, let's dive into this, right? Because I was talking about how to avoid common crypto scams. I really feel like people should watch that video, because I got scammed through like it was VeVe, but through like on Discord. Yeah. You know, someone contacted me and stuff, and like I tried to do this trade because the market was down, right? Mm-hmm. And tried to do a trade, and I was going to do a Jim Lee Joker and like $50 for like the Ultraman Ace, I think is what it was. And yeah, like basically because the Ace was higher at the time, I'm like, okay, I'll send you my, and he showed me these references and stuff, you know, of people who've done trades. Pictures. So I sent it, right? But I didn't send the 50 gems. And I'm like, yo, where's my thing? And he's like, oh, it's just taking longer. It's just taking longer. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I got scammed, you know. And then I put it in the Discord. I was like, yo, this guy is scamming. And he was like in the middle of scamming 2 other people like at that time. And so then like I saved those people and stuff. And a lot of people get their, you know, give away their seed phrases, like so many things like that. So yeah, I mean, crypto scams is no joke, and I think that we're going to touch on this, like, you know, as we I went first. That was my rookie mistake, right? Like I was trusting. I'm just like, look, like I'm honest. Like of course someone else, they should be honest too. And I mean, look, I fell for it, and that's when I'm like, I make these videos, but there's a lot of other scams that happen in Discord or on the internet and stuff, like clicking when you're searching in, especially with like your wallet, but like going and searching like Pancake Swap, right? Or Uniswap. And these scammers will pay Google to have their ad at the top. Everything looks like Uniswap, right? But it's a different URL when you hover over it. But you connect your wallet, right? And you get drained and stuff. So like, anyways, like, it's crazy how many scams are out there and stuff. So, I mean, Too Long Didn't Read, like, don't ever answer anyone who messages you first in Discord. Always go to freaking like CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko and go to the websites for trading, like, you know, swapping sites or dexes through there. Like those are going to save you a lot. But okay. So jumping into the first thing I want to do as we start to address, quote unquote, the accusations of you being the Fudmaster Supreme, right? Is that they're saying, hey, and it's not just you, but there's been multiple accusations towards YouTubers saying, they are being paid to FUD VeVe. So direct question, Kay, have you ever in any way, shape, or form been compensated to be critical of, to FUD, or do anything against VeVe?
Nope.
Okay.
All of my criticisms come from myself. Like, I would have made these criticisms regardless. And just for transparency, actually, a lot of these criticisms come from, and I'm sure the people watching will probably confirm this, because there are some OGs around like watching as well. Is it comes from my conversations with a lot of these old people, and it's not just people joining the same time as me. It's people who have been around like very, very early on, like crowd sales stage, because they feel comfortable talking to me for some reason. I think because they watched my YouTube channel early on, and they thought my content was like more, the way they describe it, as like level-headed and not like moon boyish, or like just a like content. Like they thought I was like trying to convey my points with like evidence. Like I had a very evidence-based approach, and so they felt more comfortable talking to me. And they're like, oh, can you like talk to the team about this, like get people's opinions on this, because they're like, I'm very disappointed, like this is like this is not what I thought it was going to be, like that kind of stuff, right? And some of these people, they'll talk to me because they don't want to talk about it publicly for fear of being attacked. And that's the other problem, right? Is they feel like if they voice their concerns critically in public, either they have this kind of like paranoia where they think the team is gonna block their account, or like distance themselves from these people because they're critical, or they think there are other people who they're like friends with who love VeVe. They feel like those people aren't going to be friends with them anymore, or like what else? Yeah, or they're just going to get attacked publicly on Twitter for like FUDding. So they just don't say anything, but they do have these thoughts, and they talk to me about this stuff. And so for me, it's like, well, I agree with your your thoughts, and like all the things that you're worried about and how you feel. So yeah, I'll publicly like bring these points up. And if you look at if you go on the post that I made of on Mitch's post right today, where he was talking about it was interoperability in Web3 and all that stuff, right? Like my post has nearly as many likes as Mitch's original post, and like the second most liked post has like 10. Mine has over 100 now, because all these people who are always talking to me, they went and smashed that like, because there's a lot of people who surprisingly a lot of people who are upset or like unhappy about the way things are right now, but they just don't say publicly. So it's a bit of an illusion. It's like you feel like there aren't that many unhappy people, but there's actually quite a lot, which is kind of what motivates me to kind of be more vocal, because I like, it's not my bags. People know I sold my VeVe stuff ages ago, because I was predicting the downturn of the economy. I was saying in the video very clearly, the rates have not gone up enough to compensate for the level of inflation. We're going to get wrecked next year. And I did this in July. So I gave everyone plenty of warning. And boom, it happened. If I didn't sound like another 50%. So yeah, like there's nothing for me to gain or lose, to be honest. Like I just feel bad for a lot of these people, because a lot of them, they're like, I treat them like friends, like, because we've been talking for such a long time. We talk about non-VeVe stuff, like like Biscuits, the Gale, there's Legacy. There's like tons of old people, like the ones who are still around in like other NFT projects as well. I feel like some of them are more vocal now. Some of them are still like not as vocal, but they all got the same opinion. So it's like, I really don't mind, because to be honest, the other thing that I don't like is I'm a very like anti-corporate person. Like I hate when companies like take advantage of people, because that's how many of these people feel. Like they're like, we were sold one thing and we're getting something else, and I feel like I question the integrity of the team and all of that stuff. So I have to like kind of for my own kind of like you can see that's quite a big sample size as well. Nearly 1,400 people.
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, I mean, obviously, like I think it's and this is I had this tweet up on like intentionally, right? Because people had insinuated that you'd been paid. That's why I wanted to ask you outright, because I didn't. You had never been like no, I haven't been paid. I'm like, let's just get that out there. Like, No, he hasn't been paid, and I like this explanation.
I think
And
just to like super clarify, right? Because people know, because I'm very transparent. I tell everyone, by the way, I've done 2 sponsored videos with Quid. I've done a sponsored thing with McFarlane. So people just assume because they're paying me, it includes like talking about VeVe. But in the contract, nowhere is there any reference of like for my contracts, right? I don't know about other people. I'm not going to speak about them, but for me, I've done 2 drops with Quid, and
yeah,
everyone video is like paid content sponsored. It's paid content, even in the description. It's like this is sponsored, just to make it super clear. And it's literally just to talk about the drop. And if you go and watch the video, I don't mention VeVe at all. I only talk about the drop and like the IP and whatnot and how to do it, all of that stuff. And that's all I got asked to do, and that's what I do. The criticisms like is irrelevant to anything else.
yeah. I mean, when VeVe Vault is saying, yeah, who would pay to flood VeVe? Look, I mean, there's speculation, right? I mean, Quid came out, like the CEO of Quid came out and basically like attacked VeVe at one point in one of his videos, and I think that people are attributing that and being like, oh, is there some bad blood? And so like now, like it's more of like a subversion technique,
I think all of the competitors have attacked VeVe at some point, because William Quigley, is that his name? William Quigley, the wax dude. Yeah. He. I remember when he was calling VeVe like not NFTs back when they were on GoChain, right? And then we had the guys from Hero. I remember they were making fun of VeVe at one point. It was more of a joke kind of thing, but it was kind of funny. But some people took it very offensively. And then we had, like you said, like the Quid CEO, and then there was that one guy on Quid who used to run their social media. Like he used to antagonize VeVe people all the time. That's why I didn't look at Quid, was because I thought their team was really unprofessional at the time. But I found out that they actually fired that guy, and they replaced that guy with someone from the VeVe community as their social media like guy. So that's why there's been a like difference in the how they approach things now. And they've actually leveled up, like in terms of the product, they've done a lot since Animoca invested in them. Like it's actually, I would go as far to say that Quid is actually okay now. It's not terrible. It's actually okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you have Animoca brands and they're heavily invested in the Web3 space, right? And so, like, even when they get those investments, they also have those connections to touch base with other Web3 companies, like what are they doing, and get insight and leverage some of those connections and the resources behind that. Okay, diving into the quote unquote FUD, like this is just one of that. I was like, you know what? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about interoperability, because you and I kind of had an exchange a little bit about. And let's be clear, because I think that people read your tweet, and here's the problem with tweets, like just in general, is people will misinterpret tone. They'll put their own tone to it. They'll interpret things however the mood they're in like affects all of that, right? But basically the context behind it was during an AMA with Lori Brenner, Queen VeVe, she had said, hey, there's questions from the community about if VeVe were ever to go bankrupt, right? Like what would happen with our NFTs there? So then you were like, hey, on the Around the Comey verse that I do with Jordan Riz and Tyler Wilson, and you've been on it, like, just like a bunch of VeVe YouTubers and talking heads, I guess. But you were like, hey, will you discuss this? And then you and I kind of had like a text, but like, do you want to touch on some of your concerns? Or, I mean, let's dive into this topic of interoperability. And their question is it truly important for VeVe? Should we be concerned if we are here for the long term?
Yes. So it's a big topic. So I think, like you said, Twitter is horrible for conveying tone, because when I talk about stuff, I talk like this, like, I'm not like, like, what's the word, like condescending or anything like that. I'm just like, like this is just what it is, right? Like, again, like I said, like I don't really care. Like, to be honest, I care more about the other people and like their kind of investments. Like I tell people, don't treat it like an investment. Like, it's clearly not meant to be. But if you've already treated it like an investment, then I'll try my best to kind of help parry your concerns on it. So like the bankrupt thing, like that was something that someone pointed out, right? Because people were rightfully concerned, right? A year ago, I would have said, you're just fudding, like that's not going to happen. But this was right after, Luna, Celsius, FTX, like no one thought these companies were going to go bankrupt, because all of them, they are bigger than VeVe, like in terms of like their market cap and size, and their partnerships. Like FTX had more partnerships than I can count. Like Tom Brady chucked his whole life savings into that, right? So you have to think like, okay, like no way is this thing going to go bust, and it went bust. So rightfully so, someone was concerned, and they said, in the case of a bankruptcy, what happens to our NFTs? Because do they just vanish? Like what happens? And also in the terms of service, they have already kind of talked about what would happen if in some cases to some of the NFTs, if VeVe were no longer supporting them, right? Like they've got that in there. So for the Disney NFTs, we know that potentially Disney could pull them out of VeVe and move them to their own platform. Like that's in the terms of service, like it exists. And so clearly they thought about these scenarios, but the scenario that doesn't exist right now is if VeVe were to go bust, what happens to our NFTs? And David, he said they will move to L1 for the artist stuff. Yep. So we don't actually know what happens to the other license stuff like DC, that we don't know yet. But he said for the artist stuff, they will move to L1 so that you can then claim them. Now, the issue with that is Sanjay, again, and Sanjay is known as like one of the most hardcore VeVe supporters. Probably not so much recently. I think he had a go at the OTC thing. Like he got quite upset about that. But everyone looks at Sanjay and they're like, this guy is like a VeVe, like VeVe moon boy, basically, right? And he himself is the one who said VeVe should really put what David said in the terms of service and just seal the deal. Be like, in the case of a bankruptcy, we will release your NFTs from the artist program to L1. That would shut people up. That would give them more trust. It's an easy win for them if they just put it in the terms of service, like everything else. Literally, you take like a minute just to type it in there. Maybe they have to kind of show legal, but it's not going to take long, right? But they haven't done that, and the question is why not? Because it's a very easy win, and I would imagine it's quite important to get that stuff in your terms of service straight away. So again, I don't know why, but the important aspect is my question is more focused on the bridging side, not them potentially going bankrupt. Because if they go bankrupt, that's something I can't control. That's something they can't, directly control. Like do things to avoid it, but obviously, if it happens, it happens, right? I'm more curious about from the tech perspective, because maybe David didn't realize. He said we will release them to L1, but they never spoke anything about the fees involved, because for anyone who's done any bridging from L2 to L1, you pay gas fees, right? And I can explain why you pay the gas fees, because there's another very important concept linked to the interoperability side. But you pay gas fees for every token that you bridge. Now, that gas fee is dependent on, like network congestion on the day, things like that. So maybe you pay $5 per token. If you have 1,000 NFTs, that is going to cost you about $5,000, right? Now, we don't know if VeVe is going to pay those fees or if we're going to pay those fees. So that was never specified, but by David's language, he said released to L1. So I just assume, okay, VeVe is going to move them from L2 to L1. How is this going to be financed? We don't know yet. Is it VeVe financing it? If it is, then I would like to know how they're going to finance it. Do they have like a vault of money that's designed for this specific, doomsday scenario? Or do we as users need to budget for that? Because if we do, it's best, again, you need to put in your terms of service now so we can do that, right? Because if hypothetically it was to go bankrupt and I've got 1,000 NFTs and it's going to cost me $5 per NFT to bridge, that's $5,000. That's, for a lot of people, that's a lot of money. Like you need to budget for that. You need to, because on the day, I would ideally like to bridge my stuff ASAP, because I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Maybe they're going to freeze them on IMX forever or something. I would want to get them off ASAP. So it's very, very important. And I would say that's a very justified question that people have.
So, and yes and no, I guess to a certain extent, because, and this is where I push back a little bit, even on this discussion, right? Because people are like, well, who's going to pay for it? And I'm like, okay, well, let's say that VeVe opened up interoperability right now, and we could move our NFTs over to IMX, right? Like we would be paying for it then. Like, why in the world would then VeVe all of a sudden pay for it if they were to go bankrupt. Like to me, that seemed like a little bit of a disingenuous argument, or someone that just hadn't like thought the whole way through, where it's just yeah, like this is Web3. Like I pay, and I was like, I just paid $150 to stake some of my NFTs, right? Like, I mean, like that's Web3. Like when you're moving things around, like you are the one, they're your assets, you're paying for them. And so even if VeVe were to say release them to L1, like that was never in my mind that VeVe was going to pay for it, because they wouldn't pay for it now. There's no reason for them to pay for it in the future. And just like I don't plan, if I have a Bored Ape or something and they go bankrupt, like are they going to pay for me? Or for example, Frank DeGods, right? Like his NFT collection is on Solana and now they're bridging over to ETH, right? Like no one's going to him and saying like, hey, are you going to be paying, for this bridge, or are you just making it so that we can bridge and we're still going to have to pay for it? So that was my only pushback on that is I felt like it was self-evident, but for someone who isn't familiar with the space, who isn't in Web3, who, all they are is VeVe, I think that's a fair question, right, to ask and to get clarification on that. So I don't mind the discussion, and I like these. Look, what I love for VeVe, and this is so important, and I think that on every topic that we're going to touch here, right, the main message is transparency and communication.
Yeah.
Could VeVe be better at communicating these things, whatever they're doing, even if it's just, like David kind of talked about it, and like there could have been clarifying questions. It just didn't happen. But yeah, could it be in the terms of service that would make it more clear? That would be great. Or even just in one of their AMAs, be like, hey, I know that there's been questions about this, or even like, here's our plans going forward, right? Like interoperability. Oh, okay. Like you froze for a second. And I was like, my power just went out on some of my lights. But anyways, yeah, that transparency there is it, but like, so for me, here's my other question. So in the case, let's say that Bored Ape Yacht Club, they go under, right? And they stop paying for the servers that host the images on theirs. You'll have a token, but like, are people going to want that? Like, are people going to want, and so like, regardless of the Web3 company that has these NFTs, right? Like once they go down, they're going to stop paying for the servers that host the images that are linked to those tokens. And so, yep, we can own them, and maybe someone will acquire a company and then they can spin that back up. But like, I don't know, like we could ask that of any other like Web3 company out there that sells NFTs. Like,
I think
what's the value of those at that point?
Just
Go
to
ahead.
touch on that point. So I think the misconception with the Bored Apes, the Yuga stuff, right, is, and this is why people made fun of it for so long, is they're like, why do you care about staring at a picture of a monkey? Like, technically monkey apes, a lot of people don't know that, but yeah, monkeys have tails, apes do not have tails, so they're actually different. But I call them monkey JPEGs because everyone else does, right? It's not actually the value of the picture, it is the value of the token, because the token acts as a key. So you still have that key, and with that key, you will be able to continue to access the token gated, world of Yuga. So even though you can't see a monkey picture, that's not why people have the token. It's to access the world of Yuga. It's to go to, a fancy, expensive yacht party with celebrities. You can verify the token because you have it. That token is from the Yuga smart contract. So that token is what people want. And as far as VeVe would go, people would want the token that signifies the first Batman because it comes from the VeVe contract. And, we'll be able to show it's the Batman. And this is the other use case of interoperability. And it goes back to my point on the issue with this space overall, I found, is the lack of technical literacy, right? Because a lot of people don't realize that, you need to, at least to some extent, understand smart contracts. Have a friend who understands it for you if you don't understand, how to read them yourself. And that's fine. Like, there are people in the community who do this stuff anyway, because if you don't, what's stopping you from clicking a mint page? You have no idea what the smart contract's going to do. You click it, and bam, all your stuff is gone. So that's why technical literacy is so important. It's like investing into stocks, but you don't understand how to read like a company's finances. Like you don't understand, what PE and all of that stuff. Like you just don't. You're not financially literate, but you're going to go invest in stocks. That's not a good idea. It's the same. It's the same thing. Like you need to understand a little bit of the tech side. And the other side that I've actually recently discovered is a lot of people have never read the IMX documents. They actually don't know how IMX works. A lot of people have a misconception. They think IMX is actually like a fork of Ethereum, or it's a blockchain in itself. And it uses some kind of magic to make all the fees like gasless. Like that's not how it works. And VeVe Meister actually, props to him. He actually did a video recently, like kind of explaining how it works. And he's not a technical guy, but he figured it out. Because I've been talking to some people about interoperability and why it's so important, right? So just on that point of why I was saying the interoperability side is so important. So people don't realize that on IMX, what happens is all of the transactions that happen, like, so I've got a piece of paper here, right? And on here, like, these are some examples of transactions that might happen today. So Doc sends me an NFT, or let's say, a unicorn, right? Doc sends me a unicorn. I send that unicorn to the Gale, and then Gale then sends that unicorn to the Burn wallet, right? So this stuff is happening on IMX. So what IMX does is they take this is a bunch of transactions. So they roll it up, and then they pay some gas fees and they send it to ETH layer 1. So now this exists on ETH layer 1, this record of events. Now, what people think actually happens is they have a token which represent, let's say, we've got a Batman, right? Let's say Todd Batman. So Todd Batman. So what they actually think is, let me just, so what they actually think is there's a token which links to my Todd Batman NFT, like the asset, the 3D file, and this is what gets sent to IMX. So this is what gets sent to the blockchain ETH, but that's not actually what's happening. What gets sent is the record of events. And who is it that owns these record of events? It's the company, Immutable. So the question that people had was, is there a token for my collectible that exists on a blockchain? Because I thought IMX was a blockchain. And the answer to that, the simple answer is, at the moment, no, there is no token, which is why interoperability is important, because this token for the Todd Batman, for example, it does not exist on a blockchain at the moment. It exists in IMX, which is not a blockchain. What will happen is when we get interoperability, IMX is going to allow you to send, or bridge is the term they use, and you can read the documents to understand this. It's on section 5 of the minting process. It said when you bridge from L2 to L1, that point in time, because it's now in L1, that is when this token is now created. So the important aspect of interoperability is you cannot bridge from L2 to L1 unless you have interoperability. And at that point, when you bridge from L2 to L1 is when you mint an individual token for your asset, because the only thing that exists on a blockchain is this right now. It's the list of events that is happening, but there is no individual token that you can own linked to your asset. When you bridge from L2 to L1 is when you get this token. On that day, it is minted. And those who are in the Hero project, they learned this quite early on from day one, because people were bridging Hero cards and they were like, wow, why has my Hero card now got its own metadata, its own mint date that's different to the date on the app? That's because at that point in time, you've now minted a token. And so for people who care about ownership, like they're like, I want to own the token for my Todd Batman. There is no token that exists right now for you to own. You have to bridge it from L2 to L1. It gets minted. Now at that point, you have this. You have an individual token. Right now, you only have this, the list of events that have occurred on IMX. So if you ever want to prove I sent Doc or Doc sent the Gale a collectible, yes, you can prove that exists on the blockchain, but there is no token for you to actually own. That only happens after you have bridged. And that process is how IMX works. But a lot of people haven't spent the time to understand that. I understand why, documents are boring to read and you kind of make assumptions, but I spent the time to read it. A few other people did. And so right now, all of the collectibles, they are awaiting to become NFTs on ETH. Right now, they exist without the token on a blockchain. So that is why I would say interoperability is very important, because they're kind of like pending to become true ownable NFTs. Right now, they're like, they're basically pending. And if you don't allow that, hypothetically, if you say, no, we're never going to allow you to do that, then all of a sudden you lose that ability to say first on chain, because there is no token that exists on a blockchain yet for these collectibles. When that happens, then you're going to have a token, and that token will reference the off-chain metadata on IMX. Exactly. So at that point, your token can now say, yes, on IMX, Doc bought this from the store on VeVe. He traded it with, the Gale or someone, Kyle. At that point, that's when it happens. And what's interesting, because I see Kyle Wilson in the chat.
Yeah, shout out Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle's already got a game plan, because Kyle was involved in Hero as well. So I'm going to give away Kyle's game plan, because when you mint that collectible, it now has its own mint date, the day it was minted. So what could happen is someone who has a Todd Batman, for example, that first person to bridge it to L1 and mint it, that person now gets sole bragging rights of having the first Todd Batman on the blockchain, as in an actual token on the blockchain. And so Kyle's game plan was just to bridge as many of his grails as he can. So he basically gets all the first, because that's kind of like the game that was happening on Hero. People were trying to bridge their mythics and stuff first to claim true first. Because the first on IMX, the first on the drop day or the purchase day, that's different to the first mint date on the blockchain.
So, there's been some interesting discussion here in the chat. I think offline you're going to have to talk to So Will, because he's saying it's, IMX isn't a roll up, but like, I mean, because what you're explaining is a roll up. But so we'll have that, we'll all have to have some conversations with So Will. He's our resident Cardano Moon Boy, which I mean, I'm a big fan of Cardano as well, and love some of the projects I'm in over there. Okay, so we got Biscuit saying, read your discussion about this on Sergio's posts. Is that, what are we talking about here?
Oh, right, yeah. So Sergio, he was talking about interoperability, I believe. So I was basically trying to explain interoperability is very, very important, because a lot of people who don't understand the IMX process, who are under the impression that, I mean, Sergio himself was one of the people, I believe, who thought IMX was a blockchain. So that the misconception is not just him, but it's a lot of people. They don't understand how this tech works. Like IMX is a layer 2 solution. It's its own centralized, architecture of databases and APIs and things. It's not a blockchain. It sends stuff to the ETH blockchain, but it sends a list of transactions and events that occurred. It doesn't actually send an individual token that represents your asset. That's the difference. And that's what people want. They want that token that represents their asset, because that's what you own. That's like, that true sense of ownership. You have something that you can put in your MetaMask, because that list of transactions, you're not going to be able to put this in MetaMask. IMX owns this. It belongs to them. It does not belong to you. Even though it's got your token transactions on it, you will never be able to own that thing. That's the proof. That's the, the Starkware proof that they post. So, Sergio, I kind of explained to him like how it works. So I think he understands more of like what it is. And I posted the links to the IMX documents where you can actually read the exact section of where they explain the minting process and from how to bridge it, and how at that point you then mint the token onto L1. And the token ID that exists off chain, that's what is referenced on that token that you've just minted. So once you understand it, it makes more sense. And then all of a sudden people started to question, because I spoke to someone else who didn't understand it. Now they have this, because they were one of the people for, IMX is kind of a blockchain, but it's not. So now they are like, oh, so that kind of sucks. Like, we're not really purchasing, like the NFTs, like the normal NFTs where you've got an ERC721, like an actual token which links to one asset. Like, it's not quite like that right now. But if you bridge it and through interoperability, and then you go to L1, then yes, then you do have that token. And that's why, it's more important than people realize, because you can't claim first on chain because the token is not on chain. It's still in IMX's centralized databases.
Yeah, and this is what's so important. I remember back in 2021, it was funny because even back then I'm like, look, VeVe is awesome, but people should get educated in the space and like understand, get into other projects on ETH, right? Like some of these NFT projects, and like, oh man, I've been so close to being a millionaire from NFTs like too many times, but it's just a numbers game. So it's going to happen eventually. Like I just got to keep going with that. But like the more that you understand about the space, it's so important because that helps you in the decisions that you make, you know? And look, so here's my thing. And like I don't know how much time you have, Kay. I know it's really late there, but I'd love to keep going.
I mean, I've got like up to another hour.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. There's still a lot to talk about, but my thing is this, like the more educated you are about the space, the more educated of a decision you can make, which is so important, right? When you're putting money into anything, sometimes you can just put in it because you like the collectible, and that's fine, right? Like, and I love that. Like there are some things that I'm just like, actually like the Voltron stuff. I'm like, I freaking love Voltron. So like, I'm buying the whole set. I don't care if it goes to zero. This is awesome. Like I want it. Right. And then there's other things that I'm like, this has potential. And if things go well in the future, if that plays out right, then like, yeah, like this could do well for me. Right. But it's the more educated you are about that. And so here's what I appreciate. There's two things. I appreciate that you bringing up these comments, right? And the criticisms or the concerns with that. And I think that sometimes people feel like that like you don't also compliment VeVe on the good things they are doing as well, right? And that's where I think that people can say, or their argument is, okay, is fudding because it's just constant criticism, which like, not that it's not justified, this criticism, but what about the good things, you know, like and so I want to ask you that, are there some things, is there anything good right now that you've seen from the team? Well, okay, first and foremost, right? Like you already mentioned this, but because someone asked it in the chat, right? But you've sold the majority of your collectibles, and OMI, correct?
I've got like less than 10% of my original OMI bag left, so I would say I'm very de-risked. So I'm like, I'm not in, like, I've got no bags to pump or dump or whatever.
Okay, so what would make you bullish enough, or like, what are some of the things that you think the team has done well, or that like show some improvement, or that you could even say, hey, they've done a good job on, and what are some things that like you're hoping to improve that would get you to look at OMI more seriously again, or even some of the collectibles?
Yeah, so I guess just recently, actually. So I actually posted on Twitter, like, you know, I was impressed with the marketing that they did with Pilly Fantasy. I mean, I didn't buy it, and the collectible itself didn't perform that well in terms of the market sales. But you know, this was obviously before they did the drop on the app, right? Is I saw the production of the video. Like, I think that's the best one they've done so far. And the licensor promoted it. So, you know, I like openly tweet about this. I was like, oh wow, like, you know, the Asia marketing, like, it actually looks quite good. Yeah, David actually liked that poster because he's still like, you know, even though I'm like highly critical of the stuff, he still like kind of follows my posts and stuff. And then the other thing that I've been very, very vocal about is, you know, I think Mitch has done a very, very, like, he was like a missing piece, and he's done a very good job. Even the actual, like, the proper hardcore FUD guys, like, even they like Mitch. They're like, Mitch is the only one left who can save our bags, like, which is actually funny, right? Like, a lot of people who FUD VeVe, they actually have a lot invested in VeVe. Like, they're just you know, they're just kind of taking a different approach to it now. Yeah, I don't sleep. Yeah, so that is also quite good. I think what would kind of make me more bullish, right, is and it's the same thing I said on Danny's channel, is if they can deliver one thing really, really well with no bugs or any issues, it's delivered in a timely manner, and it just works. That's one thing. The second thing that they could do is the same thing I was suggesting a year ago. And now I can actually say I told you so. Like, this is my I told you so moment, right? Is I said a year ago, and Sanjay used to give me so much heat for it. Like, we would have so many debates about this. Is I said to them, this is a bull market. Their company must have a good valuation right now because VCs are chucking money at any random thing to do with metaverses. And I know for certain they must have had a good valuation because, you know, clearly, like, they got some good partnerships, right? So I was saying they just need to sell like 1% of the company, like to sell a bit of equity. They can get millions off of that, tens of millions, and then reinvest that money to hire like 3 to 4 good FANG level tech leads and have them redesign all of your testing pipelines and have them sort out like, some of the hiring side for you as well. Like, because typically the best recruiters for software engineers are software engineers themselves who are experienced, because they know what they need, like in terms of like how to structure their team and stuff. It's not like a external third party HR person. They're clueless, right? You need like the best people for hiring software engineers are software engineers. So I suggested this and it just never happened. It never manifested itself. Like it just carried on doing the same, outsourcing, contracting, engineers. And I had a look at their hires recently and they're still kind of doing the same thing. Like I know they've hired a lot, but the people they've hired, like if you look on LinkedIn, on their LinkedIn, they are under contract. So they're contracted. They're still contractors. And, like the nuance between contractor and employee is a contractor doesn't have the same kind of full-time, like legal protections that a full-time employee has. And the reason for that is, you're there for a certain amount of time and then they can get rid of you. Or if you aren't, if the company doesn't like you, they can get rid of you without being sued. If you're a full-time employee, you have some legal protection. If the company dismisses you, you can file for unfair dismissal. It's generally more expensive. And in many cases, depending on where you're based, if you, fire a full-time employee, you then have to continue paying them for like a month or maybe even 3 months, depending on the sector that it's in. Like it's a pain. It's more expensive to hire full-time employees for that reason, right? And you have to contribute to like pensions and things. For contractors, you don't have to do that. So they're still like hiring a lot of contractors. They're not really hiring too many full-time employees, which is what I would have liked to see. But going back to the point
real quick though, so are you sure that they're not hiring more full-time employees, or like are you talking to people who work there, like so that
sure it doesn't look like they're hiring it doesn't look like they're hiring as many as I would like, but I'm assuming, because it will be kind of weird, right, for only contractors to add I'm working at VeVe on my profile. And also these contractors, many of them are from Thailand and where else were they based? It's like around Asia. And recently Dan and David, Mitch said for Dan and David, they're based in Asia to meet some of the developers. And so it kind of lines up now. Like, a lot of them are based in Thailand and India, the more recent ones that are contracted. It's just kind of weird that when I look on LinkedIn, the ones that I see working for VeVe, it's just coming up as contract. It's not coming up as employee at VeVe. That's what LinkedIn is telling me. But they never really went and did the thing where they hired full-time, some high-level FANG tech leads. And the reason why I suggested that is the first day where I got into OMI, I saw that they really screwed up the smart contract. They accidentally locked up 100 billion tokens. So that kind of mess up, right? Like if I was to try and, if I was to kind of equate it to something else, it's like a doctor, and on the first day, they basically, someone's in for a blood test, and the doctor injects them with like an overdose of morphine and kills them. Like that, that's the level of screw up that is, because something like that is 100% you should have you would have been picked up in testing, because all you're testing for is the date. Like that's one of the most basic things that you test for. So that to me straight away from day one told me, I think something is weird with their testing. I don't know if they're even testing the contract. They just put it out there. And so for that reason is why I was like, okay, it's happened. It didn't kill the company. It kind of helped the OMI token price. But what I would like is someone to sort out the testing pipelines so that stuff like this doesn't happen in the future, because it can be devastating once you have a bigger user base. And what happened recently, the contract allowed, on the VeVe contract, not the OMI one, the VeVe contract allowed non-team members, non-company wallet to mint sub 40s, and look at the mess that caused, right? Now, if they had taken the advice and they had proper testing pipelines, just making sure that public people aren't mint sub 40s, like that would have been one of the simplest things that you would make sure you've tested for, right? From this new kind of burning crafting thing that they got going on. So that to me again tell me that they didn't quite their testing pipelines are still like a bit of a mess. That's what I'm having indicated to me, and that kind of stuff is why I suggested a year ago, like you need to hire like some good high level tech leads, so that the stuff that we're seeing now, it never would have happened. Like a lot of the stuff that we've seen, like with the bugs and things, like stopping rollouts and people complaining, like it just would not have even occurred. And that's why I suggested it. But at the time, because this stuff hadn't happened yet, people were just like, "Oh, you're just fudding." They're fine. They'll grow at their own pace. But it's like, no, like this problem has occurred before, and I don't see anything that inspires confidence in me that this level of problem won't happen again. And I'm still, even right now, even after the whole sub 40s, someone stole my Dumbo stuff, I still haven't seen them make that change. And I've got a comparison, which was IMX, because IMX back then was a very small company, smaller than VeVe. They did the exact same thing that I suggested, but they did it to the nth degree. So if you go on IMX's LinkedIn, they've grown to an engineering team of 120 plus people. Like, it's huge. They've clearly thrown all of their budget into engineering. But if you look at the people, a lot of them are ex-Facebook, ex-Amazon, ex-Google, tech leads from there. They've got the principal engineer from Atlassian. Atlassian is a freaking, a very prestigious place. They make all the dev tools that people use, like, Jira boards and, Confluence pages and things like that. So, and these people are expensive as hell. Like that one principal guy, easily multiple six figures that's what's going to cost them. So they also did the smart thing, which is what I suggested in the last bull run. I think Robbie raised, I think it was $80 million from equity sales. Like he did like Series A fundraising, and he used that money to then expand the engineering team, but he expanded it in a way where he hired very, very high quality permanent employees into the company. Not like, we're just going to hire like a software house, outsource them from somewhere in India, something like that. Place that can just get the job done quick, but it's not like sustainable. It's stuff that you would do as a startup. Like startups, 100% you would outsource it, right? But once you're in a state where you're not a startup anymore, like I know VeVe still calls themselves kind of a startup. They're still in beta, blah, blah, but at this stage, it shouldn't really be a startup. It should be like a, at least an established small company, because the amount of revenue they do is not the type of revenue a startup would be doing. Like they do very good revenue, right? And again, IMX is a good comparison. Like they're not a startup anymore. They're a proper company. You are a proper company if you've got 120 plus engineers, right? So that's why I say a lot of this stuff, because even right now, I still don't have faith that we're not going to see these same kind of issues pop up. Like, and people are going to come back to this video when the next issue pops up and be like, it was cool. That's my concern.
So do you think though, like with Mitch on board, and look, one of the reasons that everyone loves Mitch is because he's transparent. And again, like I said, I feel like almost every single issue that people are talking about or have concerns with, it boils down to the company could have been more transparent on these things and talked about it, right? And Mitch is trying to do that to a certain extent, and it's the most transparency, most replies that we've gotten, where he, like, and it's not snarky, like it's just like, okay, I appreciate this, and like I'll say this, I don't know what's going on with their hiring and stuff. So it's hard for me, but like you bring up some good points, and I want to acknowledge that, right? Like it's important to bring this up and say, hey, like now, does VeVe need to hire 6 FANG employees to be successful? I don't think they need to drop that. Now, could that make them best in class? Yes. Right. Like, so like, and do the people that they're hiring in Thailand and Asia, and like, I don't know, and maybe like the language that they're writing, and are the people or the engineers or the devs in those areas, are they more familiar with that language than other devs?
Can I just touch on one thing, right? So the reason why I said FANG in specific is because the type of products that FANG builds. So Amazon, obviously the Amazon marketplace, Facebook, freaking huge social media network. Google, everyone uses Google. So what I'm getting at is these products are so widely used that the type of problems you encounter are going to be very high level, very, very complex, like concurrency based problems. Like, how do we make sure our service is always available? How do we make sure that, we can allow people to, do this and that at the same time? Like, it's a very like high level, super complex architectural problem. And it's like, if you're a tech lead working on this kind of stuff, like the type of stuff that VeVe is doing is like literally like writing your ABCs. Like it's super, super simple from when you come from that perspective. And because you've seen high level complex problems, you know how to test for them, and you know how to think in a way where you're always, you know, potential things that could go wrong. And so you always test for those before they even get a chance to go wrong. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and also when you've worked so long in those companies, because they're very international companies, you're already working with people across the world, right? And this is very important because there's language barriers are actually a problem in tech, because if there's someone who wants a feature done, they'll tell you what they want, they'll write it down, you know, it'll be refined, but oftentimes the engineer might still misinterpret what it is that they want, and they might not deliver exactly what you want. But if you're in this, like in any of these fan companies that are very international and global, you're kind of already used to like, I guess, asking the right things to make sure you know exactly what the requirements are. Whereas if you just worked on like, you know, you're like someone who graduated not that long ago, you know, you've worked on freelance stuff and small companies, you've never ever gotten exposure to like, you know, the high level stuff. You've never really understood, you know, like all the edge cases and how to test for them. So 100% at this stage, they do need at least a few FANG level tech leads to bring in that technical leadership. Because I think even Mitch, he's realized that's what they need, because he brings in the kind of leadership from the product perspective. He's helped refine the way the teams work, because again, they were working in a very old-fashioned way. When Mitch came in, now they've started to modernize. So now they're working like he said himself. Now they've split up, rather than you know, being front end, back end, you know, DevOps. Now they're working in terms of product. So, you know, the product might be people dedicated solely to the VeVe marketplace, people dedicated solely to the drop system or the queue system. Now they split up, and that's the modern way to develop software. You don't break it up from, you know, back end, front end. Nowadays, you break it up into products so that one team truly understands the front end, the back end, the whole, you know, whole pipeline of that one specific side of the product. But as far as testing and stuff goes, I think they still do. They're lacking there, and I can tell because we recently had a huge screw up that should have been spotted earlier on.
Yeah, didn't Mitch or what? Maybe it was someone had mentioned recently that they were going to be doing that now. That they're going to be like they're now rolling it out to start doing projects concurrently, right? Different things concurrently.
Yeah. I mean, so that's a very normal thing. Like nowadays, like that's something that everyone should be doing. That's what I'm saying. Like they used to work in a very old-fashioned way, so they're still at a stage where they're just learning to become modern. Like they're working in a very like not modern way still, in some aspects.
I'll say this, and like it's interesting to compare. And I get why people do it, right? They compare some of VeVe's competitors, you know, to VeVe, but like, man, the complexity of what VeVe is doing, like working with all of those IPs compared to like HRO that like has DC comics, right? Like they have one, or McFarlane Toys, like who he owns it, he gets to make the decisions type stuff. Like it doesn't have to go to anyone to do anything. And even like Quid, I mean, with Animoca, like I don't know. So I look at VeVe and I try to take it into perspective and say, okay, like they're starting out, they have all of this complexity here. Now, like as they're working through that, so I agree with you. Like, man, like I would love to see them start building this out more, but I guess I'm still thinking more long term. Here's a couple things for me. I look at Disney. Okay, so one of the things that I do in my job is I look at third party. One of the things that I do is I will analyze third party vendor contracts, right? And is the third party performing, like all of that third party vendor management type stuff. And they do a lot of due diligence. Both parties will do a lot of due diligence on each other, right, before wanting to do that. So when I look at like Disney or Lamborghini, let's use Lamborghini, who's like they may have signed him a while ago, but like they just recently did this drop, right?
Yeah.
Like I have to imagine, especially since Lamborghini's done a drop before, right? Like they have some familiarity with the space. that if they were looking at all these things and they'd done their due diligence and that ultimately they had significant concerns, I don't think that they would put their name with VeVe's. I really don't think they would. And I think that like while you bring up very legitimate concerns, and I think it's important to voice them so that because sometimes a project or a company will miss things or won't understand what the community is asking for, the concerns of the community, unless they voice them. And that's why I think that Mitch is responding, that David, you like looks at your tweets, right? Like it is because of that. But again, when I'm looking like holistically, like I'm pretty patient. Now, I had said, and I've made it known, I'm like, look, if I don't start seeing some progress by the end of June, like I'm concerned enough that I won't put more money in. I'm not going to sell anything, but I'm not putting more money in. But I have seen, since Mitch has come on board, I have seen some progress. I've seen this app, like I've got my MCP now it's just points and it's calculating. It's like I see progress there, right?
I mean, just to add to that, right, is on that transparency aspect with Mitch is there's two important things. Is one, Mitch actually comes from like a proper, he's been working in that same role like in the past, right? And from a very kind of like, I've seen his background, like, and we've spoken as well, like he knows what he's doing, like he is a proper product owner. He's not doing this role for the first time, so he knows what kind of things to basically know. He like, so when he gets asked stuff, he's never gonna, or he'll very rarely be like, oh, you know, I don't know, let me go ask like someone else, like, which is what people were very frustrated with whenever they heard that response, or like, you know, just fluff, like, you know, not a direct response. He's very direct. And the other thing is, you know, like the company as a whole, right, is this is the problem. It's a strength and a weakness of VeVe. Like the IP is a strength, but it's also a weakness in the sense that because they have so many different IP, these guys are always constantly watching VeVe because they're associated with VeVe, right? It's a partner. So VeVe cannot, and I've told people, this has to be your expectation, is VeVe is never going to be 100% honest, right, with a lot of stuff, because if they are, some of the stuff is quite bad and it's going to reflect on the license source. So there's some stuff that they're going to, you know, probably like, you know, like tell a white lie or like, you know, just not say anything, even though you want to know. And a good example was with the money laundering in like last year, right? A lot of people, they were like, oh, wow. And I was one of them, right? I was like, yeah, VeVe's going to go to the moon. Like we're getting $8 million in the app a day, like 2.5 million users, blah, blah, blah. And then I didn't realize that, you know, there was like these rings of money launderers that were using like, you know, like expired credit cards and stuff. And they were shoveling like millions into the app. And then there was that one guy from Russia who was basic, like, if you were around, they're like in the Telegram groups of all the disabled people, they were making memes of this guy, like, because he's got a really big forehead. And basically David was trying to like he got to the point where David started talking about it publicly, and he was asking for information about that guy. Because that guy, because we saw his wallet, he had like, it was over $1 million of just ETH transactions. And I'm pretty sure he had other wallets, right? So he made a lot of money selling people, you know, fraudulent gems. And so like, it became a problem with like Interpol got involved because it's a global thing. It was literally like global money laundering incident, and that kind of stuff, right? Like they're not going to publicize that on their Twitter page because, you know, you got Disney and stuff, and they're going to be like, you know, imagine if someone puts out a news article and says, Disney partner involved in ring of money laundering, global incident, but like it's going to look so bad. So obviously, like David, he tried not to give too much detail. He just asked, like, if anyone has evidence and information about this guy, like, please work with us. So yeah, like
I have to imagine, Kay, that like, because I know that these projects, they look at the socials, they follow the tweets. I am absolutely positive that they are aware that happened because people talked about it, right? And if they're still looking at that, and there's those discussions there, so I just like to bring in a little bit of a measured approach to and be like, look, there are some things wrong, but like at the end of the day, like, do I still see them progressing? And I think that that's so important, and that's why, like, I will be 100% upfront with anyone when I talk about if I'm like, look, I'm concerned enough now that now I'm selling, or now that I've stopped investing. But for me, I'm seeing the progress. And when they have the IP, I'm looking at the IP is not bouncing. I'm not seeing Disney be like, hey, you know what? Like, we're bouncing. I mean, we've got Marvel that's locked in for like 8 years or something, right? Like, I mean, and on top of that, like if there was real concerns, typically with third-party vendor contracts, right? Like
Mm.
either party, like there's certain things or triggers that can happen where if it's like, hey, if there's fraud that occurs, or if there's these issues, we can cut the contract at any time, right? And we still haven't
Yeah.
seen that. And I think that that's important too, like to look at everything holistically and say there are issues. I don't mind people bringing them up. Bring them up constantly. It's like, hey, if things keep happening, then like I think it's merited to say like, here's another instance. Like, is the team doing anything to fix this? Like
I
I
heard
think
there was actually there was one one licensor, sorry. There was one that kind of suspended the what is it? The Cthulhu one, but that was because their community hated NFTs, and it's a small license, so they kind of had to suspend it. But there was one that apparently so someone in the community reached out to the guys and they kind of explained to them what happened, right? So it was Mighty Jax. Apparently Mighty Jax has pulled out of VeVe, and the reason they did that was because so Mighty Jax there, and this is one of my actual criticisms. Like I was really annoyed, not because of it affected me, but because of the way it affected other people, because of the inconsistency of what happened, right? So Mighty Jax, they did the the Eve collectible with the snake and the apple. So they did that, right? That was their collectible, and in the article, VeVe wrote, this collectible is going to be the first interoperable NFT that we do, and it was in the article of the drop. And everyone started FOMOing in and buying it because it's going to be the first interoperable on-chain VeVe collectible. Now, what happened was after people like FOMO bought it, VeVe went back and they deleted that section of the article. It's gone. So now you've bought something and you're not getting what you believed you had bought. And people were started, criticizing Mighty Jax over it. They were, DMing Mighty Jax saying like, you guys sold us. This is like consumer fraud, blah blah blah. And so, it was blockchain Rick, because he apparently contacts like licensors anyway, just to learn about them. Like he's the one who found out about the rewind stuff quite early on as well. So he said that apparently Mighty Jax, they're not going to do any more stuff because they took a lot of backlash over that E thing.
Do you have that? Does anyone have a snapshot of that? Because I read that article and I do not remember them ever saying that. I do remember that they said that you would get a physical piece and it would be the first digital.
Yeah.
But I don't so I would love to see that, because today I've heard this before. I have never seen the article. I read the article. I feel like that would have stuck out to me, but I definitely could have missed it. So I would love if anyone in the chat or as anyone watches this could DM me on Twitter and actually show me if they had taken a snapshot of that, because I do not recall that. And I remember Biscuits, she said she had no idea that happened. She had the physical Eve, right? She got that. I almost bought it just for the physical piece as well. But well, I would love to, that's gonna be said on the channel. But before I go any further with that, I have never seen the article. I don't recall ever reading that in there. But I would love for someone to actually show that they have a snapshot of it.
Blockchain Rick James Block. He's the one who kind of
okay, I can reach out to him.
Yeah. He's the one who explained this stuff to us about the whole Mighty Jax thing. And then I heard some people they were kind of upset about the interoperable thing. But that was that's an example where I get it, but for the most part, I don't see the licensors leaving specifically because it's quite a low risk for them, right? They're giving their IP. They don't have to deal with customer support. They don't have to deal with, the tech. They're just getting money for lending out their IP. And that's a very good business model for them. So yeah, I can see them continuing to kind of build on that aspect. And I never had an issue with the IP. I think, David, you did a really good job with the IP. My issue has always been on the execution and the tech and the transparency. It's always been that's always a consistent pattern for me.
Yeah. So I got a question here. I want to, he's asked it a couple different times. I'm trying to find, okay. So Josh he wanted to know my thoughts on in the comment earlier about interoperability, in self-custody. Look, when I interviewed Reese, when he came on to around the Comiverse, when it happened to be on my channel, I mean, we talked about this a little bit, and I said, look, I want interoperability, right? I'm all for that. I think that that's important, and I hope that we get there in some way, shape, or form. What I'm waiting to see. So will I leave the project without self-custody? if I don't know yet. Like I'm undecided on that. Because if there are use cases for the NFT, so if they create the VeVe and let's say the VeVe is successful, right? And because I own these NFTs, like I can use those as skins, or that it's token gated, and I can get I have my Spider-Man secret rare, and because of that, only those who have the Spider-Man secret rare can have the Spider-Man skin, in the VeVe or something like that. If there's that utility or that use case, and the VeVe becomes a big thing, then honestly, for me, like that's good enough. Like and so then I don't think that I would necessarily care. But do I want it? Even then, would I still want it? Like, yeah, like I do want that. I really do love a lot of like, the ownership and the self custody, like, and decentralization to a certain extent. Like I get all of that, and I'm all for that. So like, even though sometimes like I try to be measured with everything, because to me, this, like, a lot of this is an investment, and like I am trying to take the emotion out of it. And like when people bring up good points, I'm like, what are the counterpoints? And then I take that as a whole to say, am I still invested? Do I still want to invest in this project, or is it time for me to pull out? Right. And for me, like, even because there's this whole debate, like with the whole with the whole Dumbo poster thing, right? And we've kind of touched on that a couple times, and like I understand why a lot of people were upset about it. I personally don't like how VeVe handled it, but then like I also am from the measured approach, saying they were well within their rights to do so. Again, I don't think that they should have, but like what I started to take issue with when people were like, "Oh, this is legally mine," like, and I was like, "All right, come on, man." Like, like, to your point, the coding, it should have never happened, but it did happen. Yeah. But like, they are very clear that the first public mint is always 41, and like, for that person to even know that there was a burn mechanic, had to read the article, and they would have seen that public mint was 41, or it was there, and whether and like, so there's two examples. I talked about this with Block on Spaces, where I was a propagandist, right? But like, I was like, look, like back in May or April of 2021, VeVe was preparing for a drop the night before, and like someone just happened to be on the buy page, and the buy popped up, right? I swear it was NFT non-fungible wonderful.
I think it was the Ultraman poster.
Yeah, maybe it was.
It
right?
was the Adi Grano, whatever his name was. I remember it was the Ultraman poster.
And that was before the randomization of mint. So like he got like the lowest mint, right? Because he was first on there. And he reached out to VeVe and was like, "Hey, yo, like I bought this, but like I don't think that I should have been able to, because I know the drop's not till then." And they're like, "Hey, we happened to open it up for a second and you were there, like, keep it," right? And so in that spirit, like, two things. He knew that it wasn't supposed to be his. He reached out to VeVe, and to VeVe's credit, they were like, "Yo, keep it," right? They could have taken it back, but they didn't. And so like, I don't know the contracts or what special mints they have to hold back, if there's anything in there that says these specific mints go to the IP. But man, it would have been great if they would have been like, "Hey, you can have these, like, or we'll give you a similar sub 40 mint or something," right? That's not tied. That maybe would have been for a giveaway. That would have been great. But like, here's my issue, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Like, to me, I see a tidbit of hypocrisy in the Web3 space, where they tout decentralization and like, not your keys, not your crypto. But the moment they make a mistake and that costs them, then all of a sudden they want to revert back to Web 2 ideologies to say, "Oh, get it back for me because there was a mistake," right? And Ethereum blockchain, they did that, right? When there was that hack with the DAO of like $60 million, and ETH was still pretty new.
Very classic.
and they forked, right? And they said, "We're going to take that back from you, hacker," right? And they made a centralized approach, right? And they took that back, which totally goes against all Web3 values. And so, like, to me, like, my argument, and it's kind of snarky, right? And like, but it's to make a point when I'm like, okay, for all you Web3 gurus out there, who uses ETH instead of ETH Classic? Because that's hypocritical. You should be going, nope, ETH Classic is the way, because its code is law, And obviously, and then what happens when there are hacks? They reach out to the FBI. Well, if you really truly espouse Web3 values, you'd be like, crap, we made a mistake. We got to be better in our code, and we just got to own it, right? And then I pose the other question, and I say, okay, well, let's say that somehow your password was exposed, and someone hacked into your VeVe account or anyone's VeVe account listening to this, and the hackers stole your NFTs, and then they sold them on the market. They floored them. They did everything right, and were able to take that and transfer that out. Who here wouldn't be like, hey, yo, VeVe, go grab those back for me, right? Because VeVe can. And so that's like, now I have to give credit to Crypto Khaki, because he got hacked, right? With his a kid called Beast. And he was like, I made a mistake. It was stolen, and I'm moving on. And I was like, dang, okay. Okay, like he has every right, if he wants to be like, no, like that Dumbo poster should have like absolutely gone to that person, right? But like, that's my thing, is like, people want Web3 values when it doesn't affect them. But when something because of Web3 does affect them, then all of a sudden they're complaining and they're like, this isn't fair. We need more controls. I sent my money to the wrong address. It got burned. Why aren't there more controls? What's going on here, right? And they want more centralization when it impacts them. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, I mean, I agree that a lot of people just aren't consistent in their thought, because at the end of the day, people just want what's best for them. Like they'll pick and choose things, right? Sometimes they want Web 2, sometimes they want Web 3. They'll pick whichever one is best for them. So yeah, Crypto Khaki, like he did, he did a very respectable thing. Like he just owned his mistake, and he just, like I'll move on. So Biscuits gave a very good example, a very good analogy of like VeVe and how they should have done it, right? And she used the example that David Yu uses. So David Yu always says that they are a toy store, but digital. That's what they are, right? And she said, like paraphrasing what she said, she's like, VeVe should have treated it like a toy store. So if they send you the wrong package, like, rather than sending you like, I don't know, a $10 figure, they've sent you like some super limited one of one $10,000 figure. Like they wouldn't run into your house, break down the door, take it because it's theirs, and then, walk out with it. Like they just don't do that. Like what they would do is they would call you up and explain to you and be like, like this shouldn't have not gone to you. Like, would you be willing to give it back? And, or if the person's like, oh, I don't know, like it's really expensive, they'll maybe like throw in a reward and negotiate a bit, like that kind of thing. So if instead, what if they had done is emailed the person and be like, we sent you this number 41, could you send it back to us, blah, blah, blah. And then maybe the person just would have happily sent it back without asking for anything. And then if they had done that, maybe VeVe could option, like voluntarily given them something on top. Or they could like negotiate a bit, and person be like, oh, 240, 250 gems isn't that much. Like, could you guys do like, 300, 400? Like make it feel like more like a what real life toy store would do, because that's what they are, a digital toy store. So yeah, what they did kind of, like, I understand why people got annoyed, because they essentially did the equivalent of going into your house, like, slamming open the door, taking the stuff and just walking off and be like, by the way, here's some stuff. Like, you get no say in what you get. Here you go. And then I understand like propagandist's point of view, right? Is he kind of talked about like, why did they really, really want those specific mint numbers? Like, were those mint numbers specifically promised to someone? And if so, why don't they take one of their sub 40 mints, which apparently they reserve for competitions, and just give one of the other sub 40s? Like that's equivalent, right? And just, take it on the chin and be like, oh, we got a couple of less sub 40s to give away for these competitions, which apparently very rarely happen. Like, and we've got so many sub 40s at this point because they've done so many drops, but not very many giveaways. It's like, it's no big deal for like it would make the company look good. Like it would make people be more bullish on the company. And that's the kind of thing, like these small gestures, they'll go a long way in terms of inspiring confidence and bringing in new users who see, the company acts with like, some form of integrity. Because if most of your audience is Web3 and you do that kind of stuff, like you're going to lose users like that. And I'm pretty sure that might have been like the straw that broke the camel's back for some people, because, the terms of service does say VeVe can take all your stuff, shut down your account for any reason at any time. Like the terms of service literally says that. And so, you know, even though a lot of the things, like they're definitely not okay for them to do, they can do it. It's in their legal right. So this is kind of one of those things where it's in their legal right to do, but I personally don't approve of the way that they went about it. Again, they can go about it any day they want. Legally, they can, but it's not for their own like credibility and their own like, you know, the trust in the company. Like if you go about doing it in that way, like you got to expect to have some, you know, lashback and people leaving because of that as a reason. And you know, this kind of stuff, like I keep saying it multiple times, they need a Web3 advisor on their team, like especially on the marketing side. Like it would help them so much, because if they had a Web3 advisor, that person probably would have advised David Yu, by the way, if you're going to tell people you can bridge your NFTs to L1, just be aware that there are gas fees. If you're going to, you know, tell people, you know, like this kind of stuff, like, you know, be aware, like maybe it's not the best thing to just go into someone's wallet and take stuff, because that goes against, you know, Web3 fundamentals. And even when it comes to news, like the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, right? I specifically had to ask, like, I spammed them for it because it's quite important. Like, do you guys have exposure to Silicon Valley? And the main reason I asked that was Block messaged me and he's like, none of my withdrawals have been working, because normally they come in a few days, but it's been a week. And it happened in the same week Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, and the same week that Palm said that they're going to have to discontinue USDC, like their cash out, right? So these other platforms are being affected. Silicon Valley Bank's gone down, and coincidentally, the cash outs on VeVe have been delayed for like way longer than they should have. So did you guys have exposure? And I just asked that. All I wanted was a yes or no answer. And instead, the first tweet that I get from David on his Twitter is quack. That's the first thing he says, quack, because he was promoting the Howard the Duck drop, right?
Howard the Duck, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was so funny. I can't remember who did it, but they went on Robbie Ferguson's Twitter, the IMX guy, and they took a screenshot of Robbie's response, which is, Immutable has no exposure to Silicon Valley Bank. Don't worry. We have 80 million Australian dollars in the bank account as well for runway. All your assets are safe, blah, blah, blah. And then they got that image and they put that next to David's first tweet after the SIV collapse. And it just says, David Yu, quack. And it's like, this is, I saw that and I laughed. And I still never got a response to that, because if they had a Web3 advisor, let's say they have no exposure to Silicon Valley Bank, say that, because that's the easiest win you're going to get. Everyone's going to be bullish and be like, yes, VeVe has no exposure. My stuff is safe. You know, I'm going to buy more stuff because I know I'm not rugged. But the fact that they just chose not to say anything, like that's like you missed an easy win there. And anyone in the Web3 space, like they would have said, just tell these guys, because they love this, you know, like protect my asset stuff. Like, you know, even though we don't deal with SIV, just tell them we have no exposure, because you're being honest. And it's the easiest win you're going to get, especially when you have had a string of failures in that week. Like this is going to kind of, you know, claw back some of that sentiment.
You know, I'll say this, like I am extremely familiar with everything that went down with the downfall of Silicon Valley Bank, right? Yeah. And I agree. And again, look, everything that like you continue to bring up, you go back to transparency. And so like if the team ever ends up watching this stream, like that's one thing that I just hope that they take away from it is just be transparent. And there's some things that you can't be transparent. Like I work at a place like that. Honestly, sometimes like I just have to keep my mouth shut. Like I can't say anything. And like, even though you want to, right? Like you can't, like NDAs, like whatever that is, right? There are certain things that they can't share, but they can also say, we can't talk about that. Or, you know, like sometimes they can, sometimes they can't even say that. Right. But like, so I agree with you, right? There are certain easy wins that would definitely be helpful. I am 100% on board with like, I mean, I used to be the operations manager of like a pretty large furniture store, right? And one of the things that I did was customer service. And sometimes, man, like it's just like doing something that's going to cost the company money, like but like that goodwill that is earned keeps people coming back, you know? And then people hear about that, the word of mouth, like that's so big. And I mean, man, that would be huge. And like, and here's another thing too. And I don't know who came up with this idea. I wish I could, so I could shout them out. It's a phenomenal idea. But like, if VeVe was like, hey, we want to sell this out, if they were to be like, we are going to release as part of the randomization of this drop a sub 40 mint.
That'll be good.
That would be amazing. Like people would be so pumped. Like I don't care what it is. I'd be like, I mean, I'm gonna throw my name in the hat. Like I gotta try for that, right? Like
I think that's a very good idea. You should pass it on to them because some of the drops don't sell out. But I bet you if there was the chance of a sub 40 in there, even the kind of, like the Pilly Fantasy stuff, I think more people would buy that. Like I think that would be a good return for VeVe and the licensor if they just chucked one of the sub 40s in there. I mean, that's a good idea.
So I want to. So this is I've seen this a lot in Twitter. Crypto Bro talked about like Reese that the company sent him like $1 million worth of OMI or something. Look, I don't follow any of the transactions, but this is what I will address. When Crypto Rain and I, like on Crypto Rain's channel, when we interviewed Reese, he came on the channel and we specifically talked about this, and he is like, I have never received OMI in compensation. Like he purchased all of that. So if there was that transfer of $1 million worth of like OMI or something, like I don't know how he purchased $1 million, but like I'm going to take Reese at his word there. And like I'm just so on my channel here, like I'm going to bring this up just so that I can say that I've talked about that, because I appreciate all the comments and people watching. Like I think that's so helpful, and thank you. And if you haven't already, I have this little banner. Smash, push, crush, or even gently caress that like, subscribe, or all notifications button. If you like this content, and also follow Kay if you want more FUD, but also I think reasonable and supported criticism on things, and I think that that's important, and that's one of the reasons I was like as I'm building that out, and shout out to VeVe Vault, like early on in the channel when I was naming some of the OGs, he was like, oh, you're all gonna just pretend like I don't exist even though I have this massive channel. And I'm like, no, actually, like VeVe Vault, like I was in a fantasy football league with him where we, the winner got OMI, and he did help me with some drops, although I gave him an idea like that he shared on it and he didn't give me credit for it, and that kind of stung, but that's okay. But anyways, I just wanted to bring that up because that is a comment that people keep bringing up and just talking about as we're addressing some of the comments and concerns. And like my thing is this, I mean, unless like there's a couple things with unless people can actually prove that at the time, number one, that Reese sold it was directly after he had said that there were exchanges, and that they can prove that he knew that there weren't going to be exchanges, because there could have been like exchanges in the pipelines and they were talking about that, and then things fall through, right? And this is me trying to be reasonable, like, because I feel like if it was me, I would hope that people are asking those same questions. And and like I've met Reese in person, he is delightful, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt unless I can see something other than that. But like so I just wanted to touch on that like briefly. Like people sell their tokens, like founders sell their tokens, like that happens. Like I don't know, like, and if they want to cash out, props to them. If they built it to the point where those tokens are worth something, props to them. I do have concerns, and I would have issue if someone is intentionally lying about something to pump up the token price and then sell. That is an issue. I don't care who you are. That's an issue, right? And if that can be proven, then that's a major concern. That's a red flag for me. But and that's not proven. So like that's where it ends for me, as I'm like, show me proof that actually happened, and then I will make my investment decisions based on that new information. But until then, the speculation, like, and that's what I try to stay away from. And that's why anytime that you're bringing something up, I'll push back. But like, do we know how many people they're actually hiring, as opposed to like you bring up good points and saying, all I have is LinkedIn, and when I search that VeVe, right, like all the people I'm seeing, it's just contracts. And so like those types of things are supported, right? So anyways, I wanted to ask you what you thought about the Tarzan drop.
Oh, the Tarzan drop,
yeah.
So that was an interesting one because I shared that, and I had so like people, I don't know, people kind of overlook my very occasional positive comments, and I actually said, like, because Tarzan was done already by Terra Virtua, but the VeVe one, in my opinion, looks way better, and also the licensing I found out is actually a bit different. So there's two licenses. There's Lord of the Jungle, and then there's Tarzan, but Tarzan is the Lord of the Jungle. So the license that TVK apparently has, it's also with it's another company that has licensed off Edgar Rice Burroughs, the company ERB that provides Tarzan to VeVe. So they have the Lord of the Jungle NFT, which is basically Tarzan on Terra Virtua. They've had it for like ages now, so that's on the blockchain. On VeVe, they've got the license that allows them to use the name Tarzan. And also, I said the Tarzan one, in my opinion, looks better. And the Terra Virtua one looks all right as well. But if you kind of zoom in, like the hair doesn't have like the, kind of like the individual fibers that you can kind of see. It's like clumps. It looks like he's got like, really chunky like dreadlocks, like, big clumps of like hair. Like this, the physique looks a bit more cartoony. And the face looks a bit dead as well. So yeah, like the VeVe one, I think it looks cool. There's the yelling. I've seen so many memes of that now. Like people have basically dubbed over his yelling with like random sound effects.
Did you hear Kyle's? Did you hear Kyle's?
Oh, Kyle's one. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That
I didn't know that other people doing that. I'm gonna have to look for that because I was dying, man. That just like killed me. And then like Kyle, man, I've gotten to know Kyle a little bit through interactions, just some Telegram chats. He's great. And like again, if I haven't already said this, like follow Kay on Twitter or follow his YouTube channel, right? But know what you're getting. There are some people here who don't want to hear any criticisms, like Kay's going to do that. Personally, I like to follow people who criticize, like because sometimes I miss something, right? And I'm like, what am I missing? And I think that's important. And but yeah, if it's too much for someone, look, like you can block them for a while, or like block anyone, that's doing that. The people, here would be my thing on this too, though. I feel like, and there has been some what I would call toxic Twitter spaces, which I am not a fan of. Yeah. Like someone can come up there and criticize or talk about the criticisms of VeVe, that's fine. But when they shout over, like someone who comes in to make a point or defend or to offer like a counterpoint, and they are shouted down or kicked off stage or muted, get the heck out of those spaces because they are not offering you a realistic vision of it. Like, it doesn't matter what project, any project or space where they're doing that, get out of there and don't support those people. Yeah, because again, that's not helping anyone.
I mean, so in all my criticisms, everyone's kind of probably noticed this, and the team's noticed as well, is I never ever, because this is just a general, it's something that you learn in, like, especially in the software industry, is you never ever attack the person, you attack the problem, right? And there are problems clearly that need to be tackled, but I've never ever gone out and said, David Yu is useless, or like, Alex can't do his job. Like, I'll say, like, the marketing clearly isn't working, like, you guys need to do a different approach here because of the audience. I'll say that kind of stuff, right? And I'll give like figures and stuff to back it up. I'll be like, look at your social blade metrics, like, look at your sensor tower, all of this stuff, right? And I'll show that data, but I'll never say Alex can't do his job because that's not useful feedback. And for that reason, like, even publicly, like on that same tweet that you pulled up, the one where I asked people if they want me to carry on criticizing, is Mitch commented on it, and he said, just keep going, keep doing it because it's useful. Like, more criticism leads to better outcomes. And so I guess I probably never actually, I've mentioned it casually, like, to a few people, but part of the reason why I'm so outspoken, right? Because it's this is like kind of it affected me, and it's affected a lot of people, is I'm not like a VeVe maxi. I'm like, I care about the whole space, right? And it's the same with crypto, because I had the same experience. Is when I first came into VeVe, it was during the peak times, and all I had to go off of was the information out there. But I was looking at the community as well, and the community was a lot smaller. So people weren't talking about a lot of things that I wish I'd known. Like, only one person very casually mentioned it. They were like, by the way, one of the founders, not one of the founders, one of the advisors of this company is suing the company right now. Like only one person like casually mentioned it, and that was quite useful information. That would have affected my investment choice if I knew that. But no one was talking about it, and that's quite a big thing. And then no one, actually, no, one person did mention it, but again, I kind of ignored it. Because it wasn't like a proper topic. Someone said our OMI tokens are stuck in the app because they've just disabled the OMI to gems, because you used to actually have OMI to gems back then, right? And for that reason, some people couldn't withdraw their OMI from the app until after they kind of sorted that out. And they couldn't sell their OMI tokens because OMI was pumping. So in a way, some of the tokens from, you know, these OG guys, like they were locked up. And so that led to less sell pressure. So I would have liked to have known that, hey, that's actually contributing to the price pumping. These people can't sell their tokens. So if that stuff was being discussed in the public, like, oh, VeVe's app is, you know, busted, like they can't withdraw the OMI, Ben Gadenzi is like suing the hell out of them. Like, yeah, sure, people could say that's FUD. But for someone new, because I was new, I would have liked to know that information so that I can make a better investment choice. If you don't tell me that stuff, all I'm going to see is the good stuff and I'm going to slam money in. And what really, and I see it now, the second time that happened was last year, January, when we had the really big bull run because of the money laundering. People were keeping that down low. They're like, you know, we only got 1% bots, 2.5 million real users. Like, you know, you got to trust what the VeVe team's saying. There's no money laundering or any of that stuff. Like, you guys are fudding. But the people who came in at that time, that's when they did the Disney marketing. A lot of people bought like, you know, R2D2s for like 10K because they thought it was normal. But those people have had such a terrible experience now Web3. Like their first, like because VeVe marketed to like, you know, non-Web3 people, a lot of those people were non-Web3 as a result. This was their first experience of Web3, was basically coming in and experiencing what happens when you allow money laundering on your app and losing 95% of their investment because they treat it as an investment, right? So that is going to damage the space. People are going to use that as a case study and be like, you know, this is like why Web3 is terrible, because you're going to have, you know, money laundering and, you know, people hide things and it's a scam, blah, blah, blah. The founders will cover it up. Like, I don't want that for the space. Yeah. I want people to come in and have a good time because it's already, that was the same experience I had when I first joined. I wish someone had been fudding about, you know, Ben Gadenzi suing them, because then I would have taken that into consideration. I wish, you know, more people were outspoken about the money laundering thing, because then I was trusting the team. That was like, you know, I was very heavily trusting everything they were saying because I didn't really have much of a reason to doubt them. And so because if people had been honest and the team was honest to say, hey, we got like a money laundering issue here, like, you know, a lot of cheap gems in the market, I would have probably sold more of my stuff back then because I thought it was natural, right? And that's why I was making out, like looking back now, I was making some hardcore Moonboy predictions. You know, I showed the data of $8 million going in the app, you know, scaling up from like 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. And I said, based off of this data and scaling, like, I don't think the Walt is ever going to go below 40K again, because based off of the rate of growth that they've had in the past 3 months, based off the rate of growth in the amount of money going in the app, based off of what I predict they're going to do in terms of number of drops, like the amount of gems going in is going to supersede the amount of gems being pulled out from drops by far. So that excess liquidity is going to go to the grails. So I was making these ridiculous predictions with like Waltz and other things. And now looking back, now I just look like an absolute moon boy. It's like, you know, like saying that kind of stuff. Like, why did I say Walt floor was never going to drop below 40K? Well, because the data was fake, but I believed it. And so this is why I really encourage people to speak out about this stuff, because there's going to be new people coming in and you want them to know the problems occurring right now as well as the good stuff, so they can make an informed choice. You don't want to feed them, you know, only the good stuff and hide the bad stuff, because when the bad stuff hits, because it is going to hit when if it exists, then they're going to have a bad taste in their mouth from Web3, especially if they've first experience. They're never going to come back. Like, you've just lost people in the space. So you want, and if you treat them well, they're going to bring their friends and family in. So there's a reason to, you know, and to be honest, if those people see the bad stuff, but they still continue to go ahead and put money in, those are the type of people you definitely want, because those are the long-term people, because they can see the problems, but they can clearly see some kind of something there that, you know, is working, like some potential there. So those are the type of people you really want. And that's like my whole story, and, you know, reason why I'm so outspoken, and I encourage people to be outspoken as well.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a great, like, I mean, comment talking about this, right? I'm buying OMI during this max FUD. I believe in the project, right? Crypto Rain agrees, right, Doc? I mean, and like I've talked with this. So here's something that I look at, right? For VeVe, this is my take on it currently. Do I think that VeVe has a chance to succeed within the next 3 to 5 years? That they'll still be around and that they'll still be making money and that they will progress?
They're definitely
The
gonna be around.
answer for me is yes. And so then I say, if that's to occur, right? If OUP is coming out, if MCP, right? Now we get this loyalty combined synergistic program instead the loyalty program as they're calling it. If that works out and we do start burning OMI, right, from circulating supply, and so that supply is going down, and then there's the VeVe verse, and I'm looking long term at that. If I believe that all of those things are going to be successful, then for me, the timing to buy, and this is not financial advice, this is what I am doing. I am buying more OMI, and I'm buying more Grails, and I'm buying certain things that give me more Master Collector points. That's where I'm at right now because I'm looking longer term, and I think that Kate brings up really good points. Like, and I like that. I take that into consideration, right? But again, like finding and look, and poor Sowul, right? Like, I mean, he basically said when I was talking about toxic Twitter spaces, he was in a space where he was like, hey, these aren't real like NFTs. Like he was explaining a little bit of the blockchain to try to educate people. And like he got kicked down, you know, like supposedly, and then got these threats. Like that's not okay
That's
either.
not okay. No,
that's not okay, right?
When
That's
when
terrible.
people put that when people put that stuff out there in public, oh, there's people in the space who can see that's what's happening publicly. What ends up happening is those people never ever voice their opinion, and what ends up happening is they end up DMing people like me because I don't care what, like I don't mind talking about, and that's where I realize there's a lot more people than is visually shown who actually have serious concerns, and so that's why I'm like, you know what, like I don't care because I don't have any bags to lose because, you know, I'm like I deleveraged a while ago. But for these people, because a lot of these people I consider like good people, like, you know, I consider them like, you know, friends even. Like I'm like, yeah, sure, like, you know, it's not a deal for me. Like I'm used to, you know, like because I've been doing YouTube for a while, like I've got like thick skin anyway. I don't care what people say. You know, obviously I appreciate the good comments, but like it's whatever. Like people want to call me fudding, then I'll use that name. I'll call myself Fudmaster Supreme. I don't care.
Look, I know that Wes feels pretty strongly that you've turned negative for no reason. I'll say this, Wes. Like, I am right now. I still am buying OMI, and I love this that foamy that someone said. That's amazing. You need to coin like that's amazing. But look, I don't like. Kay has brought up more criticisms than he used to, right? And I think that's what, like. I still feel like a lot of the things that he's saying like make sense. Again, I push back with the whole bankruptcy thing and like what my concerns were on that and like who's paying for it. Like I try to push back on that to provide a perspective. And that's okay. And people can do that too, right? But like let's stop with the name calling and personal attacks on people. You can disagree with someone. And again, if you feel like that's just too negative for you or too positive for you, there's a block button, right? Like on Twitter for a reason, you know. I rarely block people. There's a couple people that constantly like or call me Moon Boy or whatever. And to, you know, they're making false accusations to me. They're just harmless because I'm like, maybe if it was true, like that would hurt my feelings, but I don't care. Like it's meaningless to me. But like for people where that does affect, like I've seen some people, and I've been there too sometimes, man. Whether it's crypto Twitter or just like social. Platforms, like sometimes you need to disconnect, guys. Go touch grass, right? If you're too emotionally involved in stuff like that, like maybe pull back a little bit. But Kate, I do appreciate the comments, right? And I know that you said an hour, and we've already gone over an hour. So here you go. Here's a perfect one. John Cena, he loves me. He loves me so much. Like, hey, I appreciate you watching, John. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Look, my opinion is not for everyone, and that's okay. Kay's opinion apparently isn't for everyone, and that's okay. But what I appreciate is the people who are educated and are trying to educate people in the space and bring things up. And I appreciate you, Kay. I appreciate, like, I learned a lot from your videos early on. I appreciate the time and effort that you did in building your YouTube channel, right? And keep growing, man, and learning and educating people. Maybe you could also point out a little bit more good things every once in a while, be a little bit more balanced in that if you see
Yeah, I
something.
mean, if there's anything good I see, I'll be the first one to congratulate the team.
Yeah, but oh, I like this. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of keyboard warriors out there. But hey, shout out to you, VeVe fam, for watching. Everyone who's stayed and watched. Again, if you haven't, follow Kay on his socials, Twitter, his YouTube. Really smart guy. I don't always agree with him. He doesn't always agree with me, and that's great. I love the constant communication, and that's how we learn and grow in this space. And with that, we'll leave you guys. Thanks so much.